Anyway, members, thank you very much. Thank you for attending the Planning Committee for July at County Hall. Just a bit of housekeeping first. If you hear the fire alarms, please leave by the double doors, go down the stairs and go and congregate on the bottom car park. Okay, so anyway, moving on. Item 1, apologies. Jason.
I've just received apologies from Councillor Burfoot and Councillor Cruz, who's here as the Secretary.
I do know Councillor Swindle might be late, so we'll allow for that. Anyway, item 2, approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I so move.
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions. That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 3, interests. Any member declaring any interests?
Okay. Interest in item 5.5, so the land in question belongs to a close family member, so I'll probably need to leave the room for that.
Okay, so that's a procurement. Thank you. Anyway, going on for items for determination. I'm going to move a few items around because we've got a young lady here with a young baby, so I thought it's only fair to get her on first. So we're taking items 5.3 and 5.4 first. So the first application for determination tonight is application number 21/00311, and it's for solar panels, housing for smart meter and erection of shed at 37A John Street, Wirksworth. I have one speaker on this. It is the applicant. She has 5 minutes to speak. And Miss McLaren, if you'd like to take the chair and start, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. Thanks for allowing me to speak and to go first in the proceedings. I really appreciate that. Right to business. These panels are proposed on the roof of a listed building which I bought a year ago and I'm bringing back to life after years of neglect. As serious structural issues was literally falling down, unoccupied for years, and has been on the market for over a year as no one else was prepared to take it on. The renovation is led by what is best for the historic building. It's a sensitive restoration with heritage and sustainability at its heart. We have listed buildings consent for all the renovation work so far. The proposed solar panels would work in combination with a ground source heat pump to make the building carbon neutral, supported by other energy efficient measures such as wall and roof insulation, double or secondary glazing where appropriate, draft proofing and floor heating. This is a whole buildings approach, as detailed in the Design, Access and Heritage Statement, which I trust you've all had the chance to read. Today's solar panels are much more streamlined and aesthetically pleasing than ever before. We have selected highly efficient, slimline panels with a black anti-reflective finish, mounted on low, black-coloured brackets to be as visually unobtrusive as possible. They are reversible and will have no impact on the original built fabric. We aim to be sympathetic to this heritage asset and its surroundings. But these solar panels would be visible from the public realm and will never be in keeping with the historic building entirely, so will of course look distinctive or alien as described in the report. But the climate is changing fast and the way we think about these needs to change too. We have gathered many supportive comments from neighbours, locals, visitors, local councillors, stall holders at the local market right next to it, and other local businesses. I've brought more in a petition for you today. One neighbour commented that being able to see renewable forms of energy shouldn't be an issue. It certainly isn't for us who can see the property's roof and gardens from our windows. Another said this is the contemporary equivalent of the architectural work that won Wirksworth the European prize in the 70s and 80s. It should go ahead. Another that solar panels are now a normal part of our landscape and to be celebrated and applauded. They have been compared to bus shelters, traffic lights, shop signs, all things that you see right in front of the property. Several people say they love to see them as it sends a message. So I propose that we should see these panels as not harmful to the setting, but as symbols of positive and progressive action. The other aspect to be considered today is whether the harm outweighs the benefits. The Council's own Conservation Officer found that the harm constituted by the panels is not substantial. So I'd like to actually correct a comment made yesterday at the site visit, where one of the officers said that it was found to be significant harm, as that is not true according to your expert. The report makes it abundantly clear that the installation would not constitute substantial harm, and that this harm should be weighed against the public benefits. The case officer considers them to be to offer too minor a contribution to the production of renewable energy to outweigh the harm identified. But this conflicts with the Derbyshire Dales local plan that states that the council will encourage the provision of small-scale renewable energy developments utilising technology such as solar panels. It also fails to acknowledge the power of individual action as part of the bigger picture. 19 million homes need to decarbonise in order to hit the UK net zero targets. How are government ever going to hit these targets if people like myself, who are prepared and financially able to install renewable energy, which is not cheap by any means, are not supported? The Council's own climate emergency declaration and principles from Vision Derbyshire both support this proposal. It could provide an exemplar for others to follow, showing the technology to be worthwhile and acceptable if care is taken in the design. From the public consultations, it is clear that many people are in support of the panels, despite it being a listed building in the conservation area. Other examples of visible solar panels in local conservation areas include in Worksworth in the cinema, where there's 42 panels on the 18th century malt house, clearly visible from the street, which was acceptable to the planning department. In Old Matlock, on the beautiful historic Arms house.
30 seconds left.
Which have panels on the facing the street. And there was also the recent case in Matlock Bank, which gained approval from yourselves. So I appeal to you not to follow the officer's recommendation to refuse this application, but also ask if you would be open to negotiation about amendments that would make the application acceptable to the majority if needed, following Works Civic Society's suggestion to have them only on the lower roof, for example, as in the end compromise may be the best solution.
Thank you very much, Ms McLaren.
Thank you.
Right, before we move on and get the presentation, there is a little bit of late representation, so I'll give you a few minutes to read through that. Members happy? Okay, over to you, Sarah.
Okay. Right, this proposal, obviously, I'm going to take it as one. It's a full application and a listed building application, listed building consent. There are elements to the scheme that are acceptable. There's a shed, the ground source heat pump, the electric meter housing, these are all acceptable. So really I'll focus on the solar panels. They're proposing 5 panels on the higher roof and 9 on the lower roof, 14 in total. They're going to be black, centred on the roof surface and butted together, fitted on low 14mm brackets. In terms of the power generation, the ground source heat pump power consumption would be 2.74 kilowatts, and the solar panel array is designed to provide 4 kilowatts. Obviously, we took you on site to get you to look at the site in context, and you'll see that the panels are going to be visible from the public realm, both in St John Street and the adjacent Memorial Gardens. So we do have to look at precedent here. Where the level of harm would not be substantial, paragraph 196 of the MPPF states that where a development would lead to less than substantial harm, that's what we're saying. It's not substantial harm, it's less than substantial, but we still have to find a level of harm within that. Less than substantial harm to the significance of the designated heritage asset, that harm should be weighted against the public benefits of the proposal. So that's the exercise that has been undertaken within the assessment. We've acknowledged the public benefit of the panels that would make a contribution to the production of renewable energy and lowering carbon emissions. However, we feel this would make a very modest public benefit. Therefore, due to the significance of the heritage asset affected, this benefit would be outweighed by the harm identified on the prominent south-facing roof slopes of the property, which are architecturally significant elements of the listed building. And in carrying out this weighting exercise, we have looked at appeal decisions for solar panels on listed buildings and taken that into account in our assessment. Finally, I would say that obviously listed buildings are a finite resource to be preserved for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Could you tell me what relevance there is in these appeals? I mean, how recent are these decisions, please?
The most relevant, most recent was 2017. A lot of them did the weighting exercise that I was talking about. They weighed it against the public benefits of renewable energy versus the harm to the listed building, and all of them that I reviewed considered there to be harm, and that outweighed the benefit.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to come back for debate.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Could you tell me, Sarah, please, Worcester Civic Society have welcomed him, really, and the really heritage group, really, so what's your views on that?
The Works with Civic Society weren't completely happy with the scheme. They discussed negotiation of a reduction in the number of solar panels.
But they did generally say it weren't much harm in what they were doing, the solar panels.
Well, obviously, my opinion, my assessment is in my report. I consider the harm to outweigh the benefit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else, Peter, now?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Gamble.
Just about the panels themselves, because obviously, as I think the applicant stated, solar panels have changed an awful lot, and in recent years, particularly actually, the sort of the design and the sort of how incongruous they look has changed an awful lot in probably the last 4 or 5 years, even possibly. The appeals that you mentioned, were they on the old style solar panels, or were they on the new, more modern, less obvious ones?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
And would it have been, I mean, I don't know if anyone else would have found it useful, but I think Could we have done a mock-up of what the panels would have looked like on the roof, as a photo mock-up?
We have the elevations, that's all we have. No,
There is one in the design and access.
Excuse me. No talking while we're in committee, thank you. Right, there's nobody else down for question. Councillor Buttle.
I've got one small question. If we allow them these solar panels, will they be allowed for the lifetime of this panel or forever? Because if a solar panel lasts 25 years and a heritage asset lasts 200 so far and maybe another 300, maybe we're only looking at 10% of the lifetime of this property, or even 10% of its entire lifetime before we have completely decarbonised our electricity supply, in which case it's just here today, gone tomorrow, and we can just let it through and just deal with the climate emergency here and now.
Jump, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, Councillor Buttle. It's an issue that's cropped up in the consideration of land-based wind turbines previously, and inspectors have found that a 25 to 30 year time span is significant, because it might be between a third and a half of the average human lifespan. So it's a relevant consideration, but it doesn't diminish the harm in heritage terms.
Okay. Right, I'll move into debate. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've got a clash of two great, significant and important points here. One is that obviously we need to move the debate on climate change and what can be done about it. But I'm not one that's for wholesale climate change green agenda going on everything and everybody. And I think what we need to think about here is the harm that can be done. I'm trying to find, I can't remember, it's about 20 years ago, Worksworth won a very prestigious award because of the fabric and the architecture of the buildings. And I'm pleased to hear from the applicant that you are prepared to negotiate. And I would like that to happen, because I want you to have some benefit of green energy, but I don't want damage doing to our heritage assets. And that is a fundamental plank that our authority and our planning department should sit on. So I'm going to move for deferral, Chair, on the basis that there are ints in the Worksworth. It's not the Civic Society, is it, that's into that negotiation, lower panels. And let me add, if I may, whilst I'm not on the site yesterday, I know these areas and these agenda items very well indeed. I was county councillor for Worksworth for 4 years and worked in Worksworth for a time, so I'm very intimate with these buildings. So I am concerned. I want the applicant to get the green energy, but I don't want it to destroy the fundamental reason why Worksworth won this prestigious award. I say it was about 20 years ago. Don't know if you can help me on that one, John. But it was a real coup at that time. So I think there's room here for negotiation. I'm going to move for deferral and hope that will be supported, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. As we've seen this week, we've seen record temperatures in Canada, record temperatures in America, never been experienced in this world before. We see flooding, we see all kinds of things happening. I used to work for when I started working for the Environment Agency, we never had floods in summer. And then when I come up to retirement, it was a common thing. We had floods. As I retired in August, we had floods. So the world's changing, and we've got to take a grip of it. We have, as a council, declared a climate emergency. We should stand by that. And we should send a message out to the public and that we are standing by that. And this is very little harm is going to be done to this building. These panels are put on the roof. The fabric of the building will not be harmed in any way. So it's no harm. And you talk about heritage. Well, if you just turn round from that building and look the other way, you'll see a red bricked ex-cinema was thrown up in the war years. And that's deflects from all that, and the new market is a completely new market. It's to say that these can't be done is Armsy Fabricator building is not true, and also the roof isn't a tremendously sloping roof. It's very flat, and when you wouldn't hardly see it, it's about 2.5 times that building is of height, and you wouldn't see them at all from the ground. So all in all, balancing it against the conservation side, we've got to support this. And again, I'm sorry against Officer's recommendation. We've got to support it, because if we don't send this message out that we're not supporting climate change, it won't be good. It won't be good at all. And it's not if it was a building which would do harm to it, I would agree with the officers. But there's no harm being done to this building, as it's said, as Neil said. The lifetime of the panels aren't nowhere near the lifetime of the building, so they can come off in future. So I'd like to move it against officer's recommendation.
Well, it's already been moved for deferral by Councillor Purdy, so we'll just have to go through the motions.
I'm against officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think the feel very much is that we very much understand the excellent report from the officers about this particular thing, and those of us who were on the site yesterday were very much talking about renewables and the positive impact we as a council want to make, and this applicant wants to make on her particular property. I think just reading the papers and hearing her speak so eloquently that there is room for negotiation here, and I'd like to second Councillor Purdy's motion for deferment, so we can, the officers can go away and hopefully come to a very positive solution rather than give a negative sense tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gamble.
Yeah, I think I'd pretty much echo that. I think I'd also like to say to the just to say to the it's nice to hear the applicant, the way she was speaking about the building. And I think one thing the authority should be thinking is that, we should be pleased that there is someone who really positively wants to contribute to this building. This building, if no one else wanted it, presumably, could fall into disrepair. We've got somebody who actually wants to bring this building back to life and is prepared to invest in that. And I think we should celebrate that. And I think we should negotiate with her and work for something that keeps the heritage and adds to our climate change agenda.
Okay, so I've got nobody down on my... Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm with Councillor Purdy on this one. We need to find a way around this, and I think deferral is the answer. We've talked about climate change, and we must, as Peter says, stick with it. So I think we must find a way around this problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elliott. So it's been moved
Can
and...
I just say something?
Yep, of course you can, John, yeah.
I'm just about to vote on this issue.
And do you want to come back on it, Gary?
I think from an officer perspective, it is very important that we give this careful consideration. I say that because, as Councillor Purdy said, Wirksworth is one of our heritage gems, second only probably to Cromford in terms of its importance to the evolution of our history and the way that's been preserved. You will set an example. I won't use the word precedent. You'll set an example by how you deal with this application, because others will probably follow, and giving it careful consideration and trying to minimise the harm is the right way forward to balance the heritage issues against the desire to tackle climate change. Ultimately, we may come back with a report that says there's still harm, but we can lessen that harm and allow you to vote on a revised scheme.
Thank you, John. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chair. I think I'd like to just respond to Councillor Slack. We're not refusing this, Councillor Slack. We're trying to find a way to accommodate both very important points. And you all know that as leader, I brought the climate change agenda in when I became leader in May 2019, so I'm very keen, but not whitewashing it. It's got to be done sensitively, and I do hope the applicant finds with our officers that room for manoeuvre. I read your reports about some dissatisfaction with our service. I hope that's all settled. I've seen the officer's response, but if there's any problems, do come to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. It's been moved and seconded for deferral. All those in favour, shall please show. All those against? And abstentions? 2, there's me and Colin. So that motion has been carried for deferral. So we'll move on to the next part, which is the listed building consent. We've had the presentation, so we'll move straight into debate. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Can I propose we go for deferral again on this one, please?
Yeah. Councillor Purdy, are you happy to second that?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you.
So the listed building consent has been moved and seconded for deferral for the reasons on the last application. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And abstentions? So that's been moved for deferral. So we'll get back onto the agenda properly now. Item which now is 5.1, which is application number 20/00942. This is a full application of landscaping at land east of Old Hackney Lane, Darleydale. Don't believe we have any speakers on this, but there's I think we've got one speaker on that, but there's a little bit of late correspondence which people might want to look at. It's very short, it's just one line. He's here. So anyway, like I say, it's only one line, so Mr. Piggott, if you'd like to come up to the microphone. As normal, you know you've got 5 minutes to speak, and I'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak this evening. We're naturally disappointed by the recommendation and are frustrated that the revised information supplied has not been considered by officers. We submitted a pre-application inquiry in March 2020. The Council's broad concerns about the whole allocation not coming forward together were flagged up in the written response, but in broad terms only. As a result, the submitted site layout plan included a single point of access to address officer concerns, together with a legally binding commitment to allow access through the application site to the remaining part of the allocation, and this is acknowledged in the officer report. We were, however, somewhat in the dark about what specifically officers were looking for in the site layout. Having submitted the application in October 2020, we had to wait 7 months to receive a detailed list of officer concerns. While we consider that the application before you tonight is a very attractive and well-designed scheme and worthy of officer support, we have taken officer concerns on board in an attempt to proactively engage, and a revised site layout was submitted to the Council last week. Our landscape assessment sets a number of key parameters for the site, which include landscaping buffers adjacent to the Old Hackney Lane and the north of the site. The existing central boundary between the two parcels of land should be retained and reinforced. Planting should be provided within the built form, and lower height buildings should be utilised to the north of the site. We consider that the revised layout responds directly to these parameters and also to other matters raised by officers. Due to the topography of the site, adjacent bungalows and landscape constraints, dwelling plots 1 to 10 have been designed as 1, 2 and 3 bed bungalows, which will provide accommodation suitable for the elderly in the area. The remaining 7 plots are a mixture of 3, 4 and 5 bedroom homes. This is therefore an appropriate density for the site. Whilst the whole allocation was identified for 57 houses, the landscape architects have commented that a scheme for so many houses would be far too dense and harm the landscape character of the area. Regarding open space, due to the landscaping constraints, areas are to be provided to the northern and southern boundaries, so this by its nature requires space to be spread across the site. Furthermore, we are aware of other open spaces coming forward within a short walk of the site, including the Bakewell Road development, which is just opposite the Whitworth Hospital, which is currently under construction. The reinforcement of the historic central boundary between the two parcels of land is a key factor that needs to be reinforced as part of the site's landscaping scheme. As a result, planting is proposed along this boundary, although the access point can be accommodated with a modest break in the existing stone wall to allow an attractive access to be created to the remaining part of the allocation, should this be developed. For the above reasons, a proposal for the whole allocation would make no difference to the design proposal for our parcel, or indeed the remaining land. As a result, our parcel for the application site does indeed represent the efficient use of land and is thus in accordance with the authority's policies, and we consider that the principle of the development of this parcel should be supported by the authority. As covered in my letter, we are surprised by the third, fourth and fifth reasons for refusal. The Head of Housing has indicated his support for the scheme as a way of providing 2 affordable dwellings to the Council's housing stock at no cost to the authority. Matters relating to drainage have largely been agreed subject to final approval of the amended layout, and we have had no prior warning of the fifth reason for refusal relating to climate change, which could be addressed by way of some supplementary information. Many of the local residents' objections relate to developing a greenfield site and the impact of increased traffic on Old Hackney Lane. Clearly, these issues have already been considered when allocating the site in the local plan. In summary, Chevin Homes are a Derbyshire-based house builder with a track record of delivering high-quality homes in the local area. Our legal advice has concluded that part of an allocated site can come forward in isolation, provided it does not prejudice the rest of the allocation, and we firmly believe this to be the case. I therefore ask you to defer the application. Thank you. I therefore ask you to defer the application to give us sufficient time to address your officer's concerns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Sarah, I believe this is yours. Thank you.
Firstly, I'll outline the case, then I'll address some of the points raised by the agent to do with how the application was processed, etc. So the site forms part of an allocation for 57 dwellings, with 18 proposed on this site. I have got a picture of the allocation. That's the full allocation there. So it's considered the application site and the adjoining allocated land should be developed in a comprehensive manner due to its size. It's quite a small allocation. The proposed development would comprise of piecemeal development of a much larger site and wouldn't be an efficient use of land. It's not a dense scheme, for example, and we feel that piecemeal development delivers suboptimal outcomes in terms of layout, landscaping, open space, which need to be designed on a comprehensive basis across the whole of the site. The proposed layout poorly addresses the street, it's dominated by the road, and it doesn't incorporate the natural sort of SUDS schemes within it, which is what we would expect. And it doesn't provide the adequate open space that's required. And it fails to provide a comprehensive landscape strategy. For example, in terms of the substantial northeastern buffer and southeastern buffer to the open land, there's not a great deal of landscaping on those sides to create the buffers we feel are required. Larger areas of open space create a focal point of the development and provide meaningful areas of provision, and are significantly preferable than smaller areas of provision that appear sort of leftover bits of land. In this case, we have applied the tilted balance as required to do so due to our lack of 5-year supply. And in this case, it was considered that the harm identified in terms of landscape character, layout, together with the negative implications in terms of development contributions, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the provision of 18 dwellings in relation to housing provision in the district. in terms of how the application was processed, I've kind of done my own timeline of how it progressed. And what happened in this case is that obviously the consultation responses go on the web, and the applicant wanted to address those, namely highways concerns, highways further information, and also to do with drainage. I continued to try and schedule the item to a committee starting from sort of January, but these matters weren't addressed to be able to produce a complete report. And that obviously delayed determination. It was due to come to the June committee, but we had a barrister's opinion on the application, and we felt we needed to look at that and get legal advice on it before bringing it to you. And the agent talked about presentation of amended plans. Those amended plans were presented to us after this report had been published, and they're significantly different in terms of the layout. We felt it was necessary to exercise our right to determine the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purdy.
Question of John, has he got anything to say about, first, the correspondence we received from Mr Piggott, thank you for that, and what's been put on the table tonight as to whether it's best to defer or refuse?
Yes, Chair. I'm firmly of the opinion that the correct way forward on this particular site is to determine the application. There are significant failings. Most of those, I'm sure, will be addressed if a comprehensive scheme comes forward for the whole of the site. There are a couple of issues actually that Mr Piggott raised, which I think I probably ought to cover as well. Amended plans were submitted very late in the day. They didn't address our fundamental concerns. Perhaps conveniently, they suggested that the boundary between the two fields was a really important landscape buffer that had to be retained. I think if you can perhaps go to that photograph, Chris, I think there's a photograph. From what I've seen from visiting the site, the buffer between the site, you can see it down there next to the pole stretching into the background. There's quite an attractive tree, but beyond that, there really isn't anything that warrants close protection and prevents the comprehensive development of the whole. I also took the opportunity today to speak to the Head of Housing, Mr Coggins, about his comments in the report. Mr Coggins was presented with half a site, and not surprisingly tried to make the best of that half a site. When I put the question to him today in terms of, well, you know, what about developing the whole of the site and the programme release of affordable housing over a 2 to 3 year period, he saw that there was actually a greater opportunity to achieve more. So I stand by what's in the report. It's the right way forward.
Thank you very much, John. In that case, Chair, I'm prepared to move Officer's recommendation for refusal, but what I also find disappointing as well is here we go again with the same design house throughout the rest of the country. They must get these off a shelf.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second Councillor Purdy's proposal that we go with the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Buttle.
It's a question for John, really. 57 houses on that small site seems like quite a lot in comparison to the 18 that they have there. What's the likelihood that they will actually be able to manage to fit 57 houses onto that patch, particularly if we're retaining the biodiversity of that pond area?
Yes, I don't necessarily think we would try and retain the pond area. We'd want to put biodiversity back in terms of how we dealt with landscaping in and around the site. I think the allocation of 57 is optimistic, if I'm being honest with you. I think perhaps something in the mid-40s might be a more realistic target if we get the landscaping right, the housing mix right. We've not included that in the reason for refusal, but what's proposed doesn't actually fit with our housing mix policy either. So we can achieve more, but unlikely to be 57.
Can I follow that up? Is there any likelihood that the highways will decide that 57 is also too many?
Well, the highways will have been consulted over the local plan allocation, I think if you consider the two sites together, there's an opportunity to serve the two current parcels of land off a single point of access, which maximises visibility space.
Thank you.
Councillor Gamble.
Because I'm new to all this, so I'm sort of just a bit of clarity really as to sort of how we got here in terms of the applicant obviously it seems doesn't want this brought forward to committee now, and just an opinion really. I mean, are you confident should this go to appeal that we'd win? I'm just thinking, you know, we've got two options here. We refused with the possibility of an appeal, or we defer and we hopefully get into some negotiations where we get something on this site which is more to what we want. I mean, are you confident that we will win the appeal and that we will be able to force the applicant back to the table to do what we want?
Well, I think the problem is you will struggle to address all of those reasons for refusal whilst ever the site is only half of the allocation. That's our view. At the time when the application was first submitted, we were advised by the applicants that only the landowner that they were negotiating with was interested in taking forward the allocation. We now know that the owner of the adjoining field is also showing interest in taking forward a project. So I think there's every prospect of bringing forward a combined site. Would we win the appeal? I can never guarantee that, but I think we'd have a good case.
Okay, thank you. I'll move into debate. It's been moved by Councillor Purdue and been seconded by Stuart Lee. Does anybody else want to speak in debate? Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you. Sorry, is it me or is everyone not speaking? I can't hear very well. I don't know if it's me, but I don't know if the people at the back can hear okay. Can you? You're deaf anyway. Oh, right, okay. But if everyone could just try and speak into the... I'm finding it difficult, and maybe the people on YouTube, I don't know, hopefully they can hear. Well, thank you. I'm really thank you to the officer, thank you to Sarah for explaining why the obfuscation and tardiness of what's been said in by the agent and what's said in the previous report. I know we've had COVID and everything, and that has explained it, and I think that's important to address that, because I know the officers have got lots and lots of applications to deal with. It's been a very difficult time for everybody, but thank you very much for explaining that and putting your side of the process to everyone, of getting all the consultations in by the statutory consultees as well. And it's very interesting, I think we should all learn from this, ladies and gentlemen, about part of an allocated site. I mean, this site is, after all, in our local plan. We have to provide the number of houses by whichever year it is, the 6,400, which we agreed in full council in the last 2 or 3 years, etc. We have to get that through, or else we'll have these things go through willy-nilly. I'm not saying that I'm in support of this. I'm going to support the proposal from Councillor Purdy, but we have to get this right somewhere, and so we have got to get over to the landowners and land managers and the owners out there that this has got to be comprehensive schemes that work. And I really think that we had a good look at the site on yesterday, and I really think this site can work. And I'm not criticising the agents at all. They've done their job for their client. It's just such a shame, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen, that the whole site could be put in and we could be positive today and come out with, as John says, 40-odd houses with the affordable housing ready on the table for the residents of Derbyshire Dales. That's just my comments tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert, and the last on my list to speak on this is Councillor Purdy.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chair. I just want to echo what Councillor Fitzherbert just said, but I want to give another message. And I did pick up in the papers that there's no mention of green energy. And this message has got to go out to applicants, agents, developers. We're very serious now in planning about green energy. We've got a climate agenda, as all other authorities have, and you've really got to come to the table and think about this very seriously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack, and then I'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this was one of the sites we looked at in the local plan. Am I correct, John?
Yeah.
And we were very undecided on this site. We do need this housing allocation, there's no doubt, as Richard's pointed out, and we do need to meet that. So I think there's potential here for this site to bring some of the houses in, but not at, it wants more in negotiations, so I'd go for a deferral so the officers can talk again to the applicant and see if we can get a satisfactory agreement. So I'd like to, has anybody moved it?
It's been moved and seconded for refusal, Councillor Slapp, so we'll go through that first, and if not, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Abstentions? So the motion's carried for refusal. Thank you very much. Right, moving swiftly on, item 5.2 on our agenda, application number 21/00494, full retention of horse exercise arena and use of land as a dog exercise area at North Park Farm, Whitworth Road, Darley Dale. We have 3 speakers on this, and the first on my list is Mr. Barry Mellor, Chair of Darley Hillside Residents Association, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, may I ask your favour on something? I'm happy to speak first. My 2 colleagues, could we swap them round?
Of course you can, yeah.
Yeah, so John Wood after me and then John Grove following. Thank you, Chair. It's much appreciated. Right. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to object to this retrospective planning application. As in the introduction, as Chair of Darley Hillside Residents Association, I am speaking on behalf of our wider community. First of all, can I make it clear that we have no issues at all about the purpose of constructing a horse exercise area for personal use? That seems perfectly reasonable. Our objections are about how this has been carried out and then addressed by officers. First of all, there has yet again been a blatant disregard of the planning processes with no prior approval for this development. Therefore, no assessments have been carried out. Officers have no idea of what lies below the horse exercise area surface, with thousands of tons of uncontrolled building waste having been tipped onto this environmentally sensitive area. It has natural springs, a high water table, and acts as a drain from the moorlands to the east of the site. Secondly, it is ludicrous to suggest that there is limited visibility of this major artificial plateau which has been created. Over time, without approval, it is now 150 metres long, 10 metres high in places, and 5 metres high around this horse exercise area. Even more ludicrous to suggest that this will somehow disappear when grassed over. It is a complete eyesore and has adversely impacted the nature and character of the landscape. It can be seen from the south public footpath, by Northwood Lane residents, and lower in the valley from A6 residents, especially in winter when the leaves are in full. They are not in leaf. Trees are not in leaf, pardon me. We believe that contrary to approvals, that this site is being used for a range of commercial activities, some of which are registered at Companies House. And finally, we are unhappy about the unhelpful attitude taken by officers to concerns regarding this development, which have been raised over a considerable time. Residents have frankly been treated as a nuisance. Reports and evidence provided has been ignored. Responsibilities with county have been disputed and ignored. Misleading information has been challenged and ignored. And the officer's report misrepresents and belittles the serious concerns of residents, and it was left to residents to call in the Environmental Agency, who have now issued a section...
30 seconds left.
Pardon?
30 seconds left.
Thank you. If you should approve this application, it will reinforce a serious and dangerous precedent across Derbyshire Dales, encouraging unscrupulous developers to undertake unapproved and environmentally damaging work, with the full expectation that if and when caught, they will merely put in a respective planning application, in effect rewarding duplicity and bad practice. Thank
you very much, Mr. Miller. The next on my list is Mr. John Wood, Darley-Dale local resident, to speak against the application. You similarly have 3 minutes. and I'll indicate when there's 30 seconds left.
Good afternoon, Chair, councillors and officers. I welcome the opportunity to make a representation in opposition to the application, and I live in a neighbouring property, Mole End, Northwood Lane. The officer has assessed the impact upon amenity. He notes that the relocation of the facility is 35 metres towards the properties on the south and west of Northwood Road, and I quote, is not so much closer to residential properties that a recommendation of refusal could be substantiated. Please, I will indulge you, could you review the photograph that is on each of your, colour photograph on each of your tables, and please have a look at that and make up your own minds. You also see that this is a commercial scale undertaking. Indeed, is this an attempt to create a riding arena or an opportunity to deposit large volumes of waste from unknown sources? I note that the Environment Agency have issued a Section 34 notice for a breach of landfill procedures under EPA Act 1990. So, the proposal itself. Based upon the plan submitted and in the public domain, I'm unable to see how both a riding arena and a dog training area can be constructed. Are they on one level or two? Does this involve any additional engineering works? This is a poor quality submission, and I'm unable to understand the nature of the development or its implications. I would want a credible plan. I want to know how the water table is affected. The officer has indicated that the proposals will not lead to any issues with water drainage, and could the committee ask if he's qualified to offer such an opinion? The officer notes that the works undertaken have resulted in the loss and harm to trees on the site. These were the very trees that served to act as a partial screen to the horse training arena as approved in 2015. The officer's report quotes policy PD3, which states that the council will protect, manage and where possible will enhance biodiversity. There is no tree survey. Please show me where this application complies with policy PD3. So, would this proposal be approved in its present form if it had not already been constructed? Now, under this what if, the proposal would have been presented by the applicant. Residents and other stakeholders would have raised issues. Officers would have had the chance to scrutinise the proposals and possibly suggest changes to mitigate impact.
30 seconds left.
Committee would have deliberated and made a decision. All parties would have had a fair hearing, but that's not happened. We all have been presented with a fait accompli, a done deal, and accommodation. This undermines the legitimacy of the planning process, should be a major concern to you all as elected representatives. So, not good enough to acquiesce and approve, that undermines confidence and set a precedent. So I think now is time to stand against a flawed and retrospective application. So please decide enough is enough. Refuse the application.
Much, Mr. Wood.
Thank you.
The next on my list is Mr. John Groves from Grove Town Planning Limited on behalf of residents of Bent Lane, Darlydale, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. As stated, I'm John Groves, a Chartered Town Planner and former Chief Planning Officer with an in-depth knowledge of the complexity of development management. I represent local residents. This is a poorly presented retrospective application with inaccurate and misleading plans, an officer report which accepts the applicant's submission without challenge, yet dismisses significant local observations. A report full of assumptions without evidence or clear justification. It is not surprising that my clients have very little confidence in the planning process. The description of the development is wrong. You are not being asked just to consider the retention of a riding arena, but the retention of the massive engineering operation needed to accommodate that arena. Yet you have no accurate information which describes the extent and nature of that operation. There is no information about the materials used, no information about ground contamination, ground stability or drainage. Paragraph 178 of the NPPF, reflected in your local plan policies PD 8 and 9, places an obligation on the council to ensure that the site is suitable for the proposed use, taking account of land stability, contamination and potential impacts on the natural environment, and that information should be provided by a competent person. The report before you is frankly flippant in the way it deals with these issues, abdicating responsibility to other bodies, yet it is this council that is making the decision. I cannot see any evidence that the Environment Agency has been asked if there is an issue. In reality, the Environment Agency have issued a formal notice for breaches of environmental legislation. Work has continued on site irrespective of this notice. In simple terms, we have no idea what has been tipped on the site, no idea about whether the new landform is stable or how groundwater might have been affected. The application can and should be refused because of this lack of information. It appears to me that the development is principally a waste disposal operation with the potential financial benefits that this brings, with the location of the previously permitted riding arena a convenient side product. This is beyond the remit of the District Council, and any decision made today is potentially unlawful as a consequence. The works have dramatically changed the form and pattern of the landscape, failing to meet any of the policies in your local plan. These policies provide justification for your critical scrutiny of the
30 seconds
development,
left.
which you cannot do with the information tabled. The development has considerable potential to affect trees and ecology, yet there is no arboricultural or ecological assessment submitted for your consideration. There is no information which allows you to properly conclude that development is acceptable in terms of policies S4, PD3, PD5 and 6. The submission is fundamentally flawed. The recommendation is based on supposition, misleading and contradictory submissions, guesswork with no evidence to base the substantial conclusions reached. Thank you.
So, members, if you'll look, there is an item of late representation, so I'll let you look at that first before we continue. Committees and committees as well. Oh, right, so we only got... Do you want that one anyway, John? Right, okay, members. Thank you very much. And I think Chris is taking this one. So, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points that I need to come back on from the previous speakers. The first one I'd like to address is how we've arrived at this situation in terms of receipt of this application. I think it's inaccurate and false to say that the authority rewards scrupulous activity. This application has been submitted on the back of enforcement action having been taken by the local planning authority. Local planning authority has discretion to take necessary enforcement action and also has to act in the public interest when doing so. In this particular case, having regard to the complaints received and the nature of the breach of planning control, we felt it appropriate to invite a planning application, and a planning application has been submitted. So just to clarify that particular matter. We have obviously received the application, and members benefited from a site visit yesterday. They're able to appreciate where the riding arena has been constructed. They're able to also appreciate the position of the previously approved riding arena. Members will see on the plan in front of them on the projector at the moment, you can see the location of the previously approved arena. You can't see my cursor on the screen there, but it's basically the dotted line at the northern, or the top of that particular plan. And the revised position is further up the sloping land. Officers feel, I think they pointed out the main views of this arena from within the wider landscape, and we feel when viewed against the backdrop of the existing planting behind the arena, which you'll see on the photographs, that it doesn't result in significant landscape harm. Members will have appreciated that themselves and be able to pass judgments on that in terms of whether they think it's acceptable development in terms of the landscape impact. In terms of the material that has been transported to site, the local planning authority has discussed this matter with the county council. Now, the information and the inquiries that we've made with the applicant is that they've got licence to be able to bring material onto site, and that material is inert material. Now, there is an investigation open with the Environment Agency as to whether that material is polluted or whether it constitutes a waste or a tipping exercise, and in that respect would be either an Environment Agency matter or a County Council matter. But as far as we're concerned, based on the information that we have before us, the material that has been deposited on site is inert material, is material to make up land in order to be able to accommodate the development. And that development that's before us this evening is an acceptable development in our view, having regard to all the relevant policies of the development plan. Now, the riding surface itself will be a permeable surface. You'll note the extent of the riding arena when visiting the site yesterday. We feel that in terms of land drainage matters, that it will not result in any localised flooding of the site, and we feel that it won't result in any land drainage issues. Hence our recommendation, our comments in the report in respect of that matter. Happy to take questions at this stage. I'm sure members will have various questions on the different matters raised.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's obviously some very strong accusations made there, and I'd like John to comment whether you consider would stand the test of judicial review, for one. And the second question is, should the application await the outcome of the inquiries by the EA?
I think Chris has outlined that we think we've dealt with this in an appropriate way. Officers don't condone the submission of retrospective planning applications, but unfortunately that's often what we have to deal with. That's what the enforcement service is there for, to investigate complaints and in appropriate circumstances invite applications to try and regularise those. I don't think we've done anything untoward. We've had an open dialogue with the County Council over whether this is a tipping operation. The county's view is it's a district matter because it's required to create the riding arena. In terms of how the waste issue is dealt with, as to whether it's contaminated or not, that's not something that we're experts in, and that is something for the Environment Agency to consider through their powers. I think we've acted entirely properly. You can point to other retrospective applications around the district and around the Matlock area. As I said before, I wish we weren't dealing with those, but sometimes we have to deal with those and decide them on the planning merits.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you. Looking at the application that we've got in front of us, it's obviously for two things, isn't it? It's for the dog exercise area as well as the horse exercise area. If I can just take the dog exercise area first, because obviously this is something that complements a current business there. And it was just in relation to really what happened on the day of the visit. But we went, an officer was going to take us to go and see the grooming business. We got there to the barn where apparently according to plans the grooming business was to be met with. Obviously there was no grooming business there. The officer asked the applicant where the grooming business was and was informed that it had now moved. And then said, well, that's something that's going to need regularising. So my question is, in terms of granting this dog exercise for this grooming business, are we granting permission for a dog turnout area based on a business has planning legal status if it is currently in an illegal place that, and to quote the officer, requires regularisation? Or are we granting the dog exercise area on the basis that the officer will regularise the business in its new location and that it will become, I know it seems a small point, but this is obviously quite a central thing to this site. It's the central thing that's creating this site as a business site, has been mentioned by some of the speakers. There are businesses registered here with Companies House that have Facebook sites. So on what basis is the applicant able to continue a business premises there? And also, on question, one of the things that came in the late submissions, I think we were asked if officers would put this drawing up. Is it going to go up? And the question I'd like on this horse thing, if we approve this, are we approving the plans submitted into the applicant, from the applicant, sorry, or are we, in terms of their view of what's been built, because obviously there's a difference in opinion of what's been built here, the red line being what the objectors feel that's been built, and the blue line as to what the applicant state has been built. Will something happen if we do regularise this? Which set of what will they be expected to comply with? And have the officers actually made any assessment of Mr. Caladine's drawings and actually calculated themselves whether that does reflect correctly what has happened on the site? And the next question is, if Mr. Caladine does turn out to be correct, will the applicant be forced, in effect, to actually remove some of this surface and take them back to the original drawings submitted?
How many questions have you got, Councillor Gamble?
Not many more. Just the other question we'd like to know is, I know we have the statement that all materials are inert. I just would like to know how we know this. Has any testing taken place on site to determine what is there? And then the next question, sorry, is regard again with the horse arena. Are officers confident that this dressage area won't become an all-weather arena and that this becomes a cover for the new house? Obviously the opportunity this that then creates for the applicant for this to be a new location for the house that's subject to an enforcement notice that's built in the current barn, which I think displays the grooming business, if I understand right. It is a concern as the ground level work obviously has been done to bring it up to the barn that the current house is in, making it quite an easy job to swap them over. And again, in terms of need as well, and obviously, you know, there is, say, here where someone is doing competition level dressage, the need for the site. Do they have a current practice, do we know, practice area for it? And I think that's the comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, officers.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Gamble. I'll do my best to try and answer those numerous questions succinctly as I can. You need to be mindful of two things in respect to the first question. We have previously granted the use of the building in part for use for dog grooming, subject to conditions, and there is a presumption therefore that that type of use is acceptable. Retention of that use, whether it's in its approved position within the building, it is something that we'll need to reflect on and consider in terms of whether that was specified in the original drawings and whether there's a requirement to amend those drawings and vary that particular condition. But you need to be mindful there's a presumption in favour of that type of use on that site. Next thing to be mindful of is that there's a condition that that exercise area can only be used in association with dogs being groomed on site. So if the dog grooming activity can't take place, then there'll be no dogs exercising in that space in association with that use. The application covers the change of use of land from what is agriculture to technically a business use, if you like, associated with a dog grooming facility. So you need to be mindful of those two things in thinking about that particular issue. You then mentioned levels. I mean, I put on the presentation there the drawings that's been presented by the applicant. Now, the fall of the land is obvious when we visited the site, and we've got a cross section here which shows the amount of cut and fill to be carried out on site. And Gareth explained in detail the need for retaining walls and the extent of and position of the embankments that are required. They'll have to comply with that drawing. That drawing would form part of any permission that's granted this evening if members were minded to approve the application. So there would be a requirement to build or construct the riding arena to that particular drawing. Can we trust that the applicant has not brought polluted or contaminated material onto the site? We can only trust or we can only rely on the information that's presented to us. We've been told that this material is inert material. We've been discussing this matter with the County Council. It's not considered to be a waste exercise. It's considered to be bringing in material in association with development being carried out on the site. We're not the regulating authority for matters relating to contamination and waste material. We can only assess the application based on the information that's before us and consider matters that are relevant to planning. Whether it be an all-weather arena, I'm assuming from that you mean, will it be a covered surface, in which case any canopy or any structure to create an all-weather surface will, of course, require planning permission. A building on the site will need planning permission, so I think we have to assume it's an open arena, a riding surface for the applicant's use. In terms of whether they need it for practicing or they've got other land, I think you saw on the site yesterday the extent of their land ownership. They've got space to ride horses. It's for their own personal use. They've got stables within the building, and it's not uncommon to have this type of facility or development in association with such activity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could I just come back on one point?
I've got more people to speak on
But there was one question.
Councillor Gamble, I've got more people.
There was a question that wasn't answered.
Councillor Gamble, I won't tell you again. Right. I'm the committee chair. What I say is final. Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the tricky situation you find yourselves in. Just in terms of the enforcement action, it's good to know that some enforcement action was undertaken. Could you elaborate a little bit on what types of activities were done, just to help me understand the context of this particular retrospective planning application? It does seem to me we have got out of control development going on this site, and I think Councillor Purdy did make a really good point around the potential risk of contamination. The Environment Agency are involved, and I'm just wondering whether they should be a formal consultee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cruz. I've brought the enforcement file with me. You can see it's a fairly sizable file. We've just got to be mindful when we take enforcement action that we've got to be acting in the public interest and be mindful of public purse as well. We can't be seen to be defending the indefensible. If there's a prospect of development that's being carried out being acceptable in planning terms, then our position will always be to invite a planning application. We don't want to be defending the indefensible, serving enforcement notices for development that's potentially acceptable, because we're vulnerable to costs and we have to be proportionate and reasonable in our approach. And we feel that we have been in this particular case, and we have invited an application. That application has been submitted and we've assessed that application on its merit, so that's where we are this evening. The County Council are aware of the application, so we've drawn it to their attention, but they consider it to be a district matter and not a county one.
Yes, you want to come back, yeah?
If I may, please. Thank you. Just on the consultee question around the Environment Agency, because obviously the intended purpose could be revealed through the Environment Agency being a consultee, and that could implicate, that could connect with whether we should approve this application or not. There's intelligence there that we're not capturing as part of our decision-making process.
The difficulty we have is that obviously we've got complainants and interested parties that feel that the material that's been brought on site is contaminated, and then we've got the applicant who's telling us that it's inert waste and they have got a licence to bring that waste onto the site. We have to trust the information that's before us, and we're satisfied that at this moment in time the material is inert and it's necessary to carry out the development. If as part of the Environment Agency's responsibility they decide that there has been contaminated waste that has been brought on site, that will need to be dealt with, and they'll have to use their powers in order to remediate those unlawful works, and they'll still have to deposit waste on site in order to carry out the development. I think we just need to distinguish those two things.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Swindle.
My questions, Chair, around environmental harm and contamination. I think they've been adequately covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swindle. Councillor Buttle.
I'm with the same, but I've got a slight... I'm curious. Will the Environment Agency have any power to have that waste removed if it turns out to be contaminated? And are they looking to see if it was contaminated? And I've got a second question, which is to do with the trees. Right, there seemed to be some discussion between the people of Darley, Hillside, and people in the applicant about whether or not trees have been damaged. Do we actually know whether or not any trees have been damaged and whether or not there's been a loss of arboricultural stuff?
Just addressing the second question first, sorry to do that in that order. You obviously saw the position of the riding arena on site yesterday at the site visit, and this photograph shows it here. So you can see the sort of the copse of trees behind the riding arena and the embankment that's been created. If we look at the block plan, you can see here the trees that are plotted on that plan. There will have been some removal of vegetation. Obviously, the grassed area there's been some significant cutting into the site. But the position of the original arena was such that it was close to trees. I mean, we can't say the development hasn't affected trees because tree roots will extend into that space. But we are where we are. The riding arena has been formed, and whatever vegetation was in that location has been removed. But it doesn't prohibit the development. We feel in landscape terms, the riding arena is in an acceptable position in terms of wider views within the surrounding landscape, and that it's an acceptable form of development in the countryside.
I'll just ask a
supplementary.
This trade waste, did we inquire where it came from, just to see whether or not it was contaminated in any way, or did we just take it that the licence was reasonably applied?
We've accepted that it's inert waste. I mean, I appreciate I haven't answered your first question.
No. Well, I'm afraid I'm not allowing questions from the floor. We're in committee now. Excuse me. Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. In the event that the committee decide to approve this, what about noise attenuation, and is there any need for conditioning number of dogs on site?
I think it's a case of just having regard to the conditions that we're looking to impose. So just be mindful of the previous permission that's been granted for the use of the site. So the dog exercise area is only for use by dogs that have been groomed on site. So there's only going to be a small number of dogs that will probably be part of one household or group of dogs. So we wouldn't envisage much in the way of noise in terms of dogs barking on site. And the use of the riding arena, we don't feel that there will be any significant noise from that activity to warrant conditions or further assessment in that respect.
Thank you. Councillor Archer.
Thanks. I'm sorry if I'm missing something. I just want to clarify something. There's clearly dispute and debate about the nature of the material that's been brought onto the site. And it's clear from the discussion tonight that it's the Environment Agency's responsibility. They're the people who could determine whether or not it is contaminated. But what I'm not sure about is are the Environment Agency actually going to come and look at this site? Do we need to ask them? Should we ask them? Or are we just never going to find out this for sure? You know, who has got the power to get the Environment Agency to come and look at it? Or is it up to the Environment Agency themselves to come and look at it?
My understanding is that there is an investigation that's been undertaken. If it's found that there is contaminated material on site, then they'll have to regularise that. And what we're granting permission for is for the engineering work, so for the development that needs planning permission. So ultimately, if they have to remove all that material, have to carry out all those remedial works, or any remedial works, they'll still have permission to be able to carry out this development. That may involve bringing other material, but it'd have to be inert material, suitable material for this particular development.
Okay. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. The normal procedure is if it's a registered tip, the Environment Agency inspect it on a regular basis to see if there's any contamination. It looks like this isn't a registered tip, is it? It's never been registered, has it?
I think they've got...
It's unofficial.
Yeah, obviously they've had permission for a riding arena, and if we grant permission this evening, they've got permission, haven't they, for a riding arena in this location. So in effect, they've got permission to carry out the engineering works and to bring material onto site.
But the material they're using, we're not sure what they're using, do we? So really, it needs an investigation into it, really.
Councillor Slack, I think that's something that the environmental agency will have to,
Yes.
and actually we can't consider that as part of the planning application. We just have to do it on its merits.
I don't know. Does
Sorry,
affect, it does
Councillor,
affect the
there are
application.
different authorities to us. They will deal with that, and if they find anything, then they're the right people to deal with it. So anyway, I'm moving into debate. Councillor Gamble.
I'm really struggling with this idea that somehow, when county have said it's a district matter what's actually under there and what's in there, we are not passing an application for someone to go and build something. It's already there. Therefore, if we approve this, surely we're approving this as is, whatever is under there. And we've never tested. We don't know what's under there. All we know is it's called builder's rubble. Builders will take all sorts of stuff. There could be asbestos, there could be the remains of any sorts of pollutants or anything in there. And I'm not saying it is there, but we don't know it's not. And also, there's an awful lot of things that, I mean, this is again back to the dog grooming area. We're going to agree this field for the dogs to be turned out to when they've been groomed. And yet in a previous application, when she actually had a hard standing area approved, we actually approved that because the applicant said that a muddy field was no good for turning just groomed dogs out of, which I can see some sense. When someone's paid £30 to have their dog bathed and groomed and coiffed, they don't usually want it turning out in a muddy field. So, well, I think there's so many questions about this, and we say, well, we've asked the applicant, and she says it's inert. You refused a house, and they went and built it. I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, sometimes people do bring this sort of thing on themselves, I'm afraid. And you know, I'm not blaming officers for the way what's happened at this site. What's happened at this site is clearly in the hands of the applicant and the applicant only. But I do think we have to treat with caution anything that's said.
Right, I'm going to bring in Kerry, our solicitor, on the point of the environmental agency and whether it's relevant to the discussion or not.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst it's not for debate that this is a retrospective planning application, we can't use any information that we've got now to discredit whether they should get planning or not, because all we are deciding on behalf of the council is do we give permission for what's there, not how it's actually going to be built. I have had sight of a letter from the Environmental Agency stating that a warning letter under Section 34 of the Environmental Protection Act was received, and in the Environment's letter they have said, and I quote, just bear with me a second, that after consideration they do not propose taking any further action in respect of the offences. So if the Environmental Agency are satisfied at this time, then it's not for the planning authority to take a different view without, because we are not the, we're not the professionals in this particular area.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that, Kerry. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move the recommendations, Chair. I think certain councillors are straying out of the remit of the planning training, and that is to focus on what it says and the details of the application. It doesn't say here we should examine the soil. So that is a matter for the Environment Agency, as Kerry rightly states. So I'm going to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I was on the site visit yesterday and on the previous one, and I think the officers should be congratulated on the amount of work that's gone into this application. A lot of work's gone into it, and they've got a very tough job to do, but we've got to follow protocol and planning laws, so I'm happy to second it.
Are you seconding it, Councillor Donnelly?
I'm seconding that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Archer.
Yeah, I mean, just a comment really. These are the sort of cases that I find quite annoying, because my instinct and my gut is telling me that to an extent, the applicants are taking a mick a bit, and my instinct is that we should be trying to prevent this sort of thing, but I also fully understand that ultimately we have to interpret planning law, and I think looking at what the officers have said, the legal case for this, I think if we would go against officer recommendation, we could find ourselves in trouble if it comes to appeal. So although, it's the sort of thing you want to say to the applicants and give them a slap on the wrist and really so they explain that they've done this in the wrong way and it's not right and proper, as far as the letter of the law is concerned, I think we're probably stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we're going to have to go with officer recommendation somewhat reluctantly.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Councillor Swindle, sorry I keep missing you, Colin. You'll have to jump up and down.
Thank you, Chair. A bit like Councillor Archer, I'm sort of annoyed by this one. Any retrospective planning application you get annoyed by, you do want to give them a slap on the wrist, but we have got to look at what's before us. But that said, I still have a lot of the reservations that Councillor Gamble has raised around the environmental issues, that we just don't seem to have any concrete information on. I know we're told we've got to look at what's before us, but I also look at what's not before us, and it's just a very, very difficult one to call. But I wasn't on the site visit, as the committee knows I can't because of my job, but my job as a postman does give me some insight, and funnily enough, for the last week I've been working on Darley Hillside, from the A6 up Whitworth Road and right up to Northwood Lane, and I also get the insight from a lot of people's gardens. So I have taken a great interest in this site, and I do personally feel as though there is harm to the landscape and the appearance of the area. So for that reason, it's pushing me off that balance onto voting against the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swindle. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the speakers who came tonight for their eloquent presentation, who've put into words the feeling of your residents and neighbours on that hillside. It is the most cracking view, with my tourism hat on, looking over to Roseley and down the valley, northward. It's a cracking view there, and a great place. I've got a lot of sympathy with everything. I think the feeling of this room is annoyance. It's sort of gut-wrenching to feel that we have to approve this, as you rightly say, poorly presented application. I think the sadness is that obviously we can't condition, I've just written down the words tidiness, taste, pride. We can't condition neighbourliness. And I'm really sorry about that for the residents up there. I think the officers have answered the questions on the contamination. Maybe there's more to go on that, but it isn't for our remit tonight. And I'm torn, like Councillor Swindle, but I think on our planning training and everything, and our planning rules and regulations, it's difficult to know how to turn this down for everything that's been said before. Thank you.
Anyway, the last person... Oh well, I'll put you down, Councillor Cruz. Councillor Bull, and then Councillor Cruz, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. I, like the past two councillors, felt quite reserved over this, actually being asked to make a decision upon things that we was told that there was an enforcement and the full issues, and until our legal expert actually gave us a reply of what the environmental health and felt about it, and they weren't going to pursue it, then obviously that changes a little bit. I still think there are things that has to be looked at, but obviously if they feel that they're not going to pursue it, then we aren't on the grounds of doing it. But I still feel very apprehensive. But as we've all said, as regards planning issues and material issues, there is no way of not accepting this planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bull. Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is a very detailed report, and I am really appreciative of all the work that's gone into it. There's a couple of things from the policy perspective that sort of stand out to me The policy seeks to secure high quality, locally distinctive and inclusive design and layout in all developments. Design and placemaking advises that all developments should respond positively to both the environment and challenge climate change. And then there's also landscape character advises that development proposals be informed by and be sympathetic to distinctive landscape character areas as identified. So I think for me, this has been and should be a distinctive landscape. I do think there are broader concerns that I've raised in terms of the design and placemaking, and also in terms of the locally distinctive and inclusive design. And for me, I'm going to have to go against the officer recommendation, reluctantly, because I know that the officers are put in a very difficult position with these retrospective planning decisions that we have to make. I also think, though, that we're not powerless, and I think as a group we do need to push back on uncontrolled development. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cruz. It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? So the motion is carried for approval. Thank you very much, members. Moving swiftly on, item number 5.5, application number 20/01043, should I say, full, Lady Hole Farm, Lady Hole Lane, Yeldersley, Derbyshire, and this is change of use of land to canine exercise field. We have no speakers on this, so we'll go straight into the presentation, and we'll have no late reps on it. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to add other than what's contained in the officer's report. Happy to take questions on this one.
Right, members, over to you. Questions? Councillor Fitzherbert.
Sorry, I missed it. Were there any objections really from any locals? I can see Lady Hole has concern with barking. Oh, right. I'm sorry. I think I haven't read that bit. There's no serious objections there then?
No. I mean, in the report it says the Town Council supports it. Any more questions, members, or shall I go straight into debate? We'll go straight into debate. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Can I move it for approval then, please?
Yes. Councillor Fitzherbert's moved it. Can I find a second? Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, I'll have a second, Chair.
Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? No. In which case I'll go to the vote. It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Yep, that's unanimous. That's been carried for approval. And last but not least, we have this is item 5.6, application number 20/01280, full estate yard, home farm, Main Street, Hopton, Derbyshire, change of use and conversion of former coach house to dwelling and erection of garage. There is two people to speak on this application. The first is Mr. Vance Leahy. I hope I've pronounced it right. Yeah, it's registered to vote.
Yeah, he was sitting there.
Oh, so it's close.
Do you want to go and fetch him, Jason?
He just got out, just asked me whether he was toilet.
Well, no, that's Tommy. He works for committees. So I presume you're Mr. Ian McHugh?
Yes.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. Being this is the last application, what we'll do is we'll take a 10-minute comfort break and come back at, shall we say, 7:45 and finish up. Members, yeah. So everybody's got the chance of having a bit of a Jimmy Riddle or whatever. Thank you very much. So back at 2:45, please, members. think everybody's back. So we'll carry on. Like I said, that's item 5.6, application number 20/01284, change of use and conversion of former coach house to dwelling erection of garage at Estates Yard, Home Farm, Main Street, Hopton. So, Mr. Vance Leahy, Hopton local resident, to comment on the application. You have 3 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so when you had the site visit was undertaken earlier by the committee, you may have noticed that no clearly defined watercourse running downhill from the culvert, and that's given that the case means that the subject property actually floods. Has this flooding of the subject property been properly addressed? In planning criteria, it is not mentioned in the officer's report. I think Andrew Stott was provided with the information and pictures from numerous sources on that. Sensibly, it would require a diversion of the current route of floodwater that currently passes through the property if it is to become a dwelling. We currently do not know where this will be engineered to be redirected to. Could the wording dwelling, as in the planning report, be changed to property in line with the fact sheets issued by the lead local flood authority, given we have legitimate concerns for erosion to the access road, walls, gardens and spillover into conduits? Also, are there flooding properties being issues being judged under surface water guidance or riparian rights and responsibilities, as they're very different rules and legal frameworks? And is the local lead flood authority aware that this is a riparian discharge from the culvert as it passes under a road? And given we have, is it being judged by the riparian laws and guidance? This comes with different legal status. So, according to the County Council's separate fact sheet states, if you own land or a property next to a culvert or pipe that forms part of a watercourse, you are legally termed a riparian landowner, which the subject property is. And on the Gov website that they send the link to, it says you must get permissions to build anything in or around watercourses, not build anything which could divert water and increase flood risk to other properties by creating like a dam, weir, bridge, culvert or changing the banks. Given the lack of design information given, then we struggle to understand how you can state that furthermore the local planning authority does not consider that the proposed development would exacerbate the issue. Prior to a design, I can't see how that statement can be true. And why below ground works only on the condition, given the walls will impact the flow of direction, and where is this new concentrated route expected to discharge?
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Given which the several current properties are affected by this, it might end up that one property cops for the lot, and that will be an increase in water discharge for that person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person on my list to speak is Mr. Ian McHugh, agent for IMCH Planning and Development Consultancy. It is to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman and members, for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Ian McHugh, and I'm speaking for the applicant in support of the proposal. This is a resubmission of an earlier withdrawn application, but essentially for the same development. The current application has been with the Council for some 6 months or so, and during that time, the applicant has been able to provide further information in order to resolve both procedural and planning issues raised by both your officers and third parties. I think it's fair to say that the principle of restoring the building to a viable use is welcomed by most. The proposal will restore and enhance the building within the conservation area, and it will not adversely affect the setting of nearby listed buildings. The works proposed will be sympathetic in terms of their scale, and the design and layout has been amended to take into account the comments of your Council's Conservation Officer. I also note that some matters are the subject of recommended conditions in terms of design. I think it's fairly clear from the consultation responses and also listening to the previous speaker, that there are two main planning issues of concern. These are the access and surface water drainage. With regard to the access, it's noted that the Highway Authority doesn't object on the basis of the building's previous use as a workshop and the fact that a number of dwellings can already use the entrance and exit from Main Street. Furthermore, the applicant has removed overgrown vegetation on the right-hand side as one emerges from the site, which is the critical direction. Turning to the surface water issue, I'm no flood risk expert, and therefore the applicant is guided by his consulting engineer. And I think the key question here is, will this proposal make the existing situation any worse? She has concluded that the proposal will not exacerbate the existing situation, given that the building and its associated runoff, there's compacted areas, open areas, etc., that currently exist. However, the proposal does offer the opportunity to offer some mitigation by altering flow routes within the site and the possible creation of a storage pond to help regulate the rate of discharge. The applicant notes that this will be the subject of a condition if you approve the application. In addition, flow levels within the building can also be designed to minimise flood risk to the property itself. Consequently, I think you could argue that there's an opportunity here to reduce flood risk on the site and the surroundings as a result of the development. Overall, we feel that the proposal represents a sustainable form of development by providing a social and economic benefit through the restoration of a brownfield site, and also it will enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very succinct. So there's no representations on this, so straight to Chris. I think you're taking this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just come back on the points that have been raised. The agent for this application has addressed the issues relating to access to the site. The other matter I just wanted to comment on was the land drainage issues that have been raised. This application is of a scale that wouldn't normally require a flood risk assessment, but we have received a flood risk report, and that has been considered by the lead local flood authority, who wouldn't actually normally comment on an application of this scale and nature. And they've referred us to their standing advice, but they haven't raised any fundamental concerns with the report that's been presented. And we have imposed a condition. You'll see in the officer's report, condition number, I think it's the last condition. Yeah, condition number 15 states that prior to works below ground, commencing a surface water drainage strategy and construction management plan to ensure that surface water flood risk is not increased during construction or post-development surrounding dwellings shall be submitted and approved. That information will be scrutinised and we'll run it past the lead local flood authority to ensure that there will be no localised flooding as a result of this development. And it's worth us pointing out as well, as part of the building regulations process, the applicant or any future developer would be required to ensure that the site is appropriately drained, both in terms of surface water and foul water, to meet building regulation requirements. It's not resulting in flooding of the environment. So we're satisfied that there are appropriate controls in place to make sure that will not happen as a result of this development. I'm happy to take questions on any other matters.
Thank you very much, Chris. Questions? Councillor Buttle.
Mr. Leahy was concerned about flooding, and the applicant's speaker, I can't remember his name, sorry, said that this could be addressed by a possible pond. Now that sounds like a fantastic thing. Can we actually say, yes, let's have a pond?
It's one of a number of options potentially available. If you look at the application site area, it does include sufficient land to have some form of attenuation basin. It could be a soakaway below ground, and it could be all sorts of different manner of things that would help mitigate.
I know I'm being a big wuss, but I love a bit of biodiversity. If we can ask for a pond, I think we should.
Well, I don't think we could impose that, because it might not be a suitable option, but we could encourage it through an advisory footnote in terms of biodiversity net gain.
Yes, please.
I'm happy with the footnote to go on. Any more questions, members? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, had it been upon there originally?
Not to my knowledge.
No. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions, members? If not, I'll move into debate. Councillor Lees?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move these officers' recommendations. Quite a thorough report again. Not very often we come across sort of 15 recommendations on it, so I'm happy to move it as officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donnelly?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Slack?
No, I think second.
Oh, right. I've nobody down else on my list, so we'll move to the vote. It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please shout. Anybody against? Any abstention? No, that's been unanimously carried for approval. So thank you very much, members. Just a little bit of housekeeping now to do.
Are you going to do the enforcement thing?
Yes. Item 6, information on active and closed enforcement investigations. It's just for noting. Councillor
Can I
Buckle.
ask questions?
1 minute. Councillor Buckle.
Yes, there's one that's pending consideration, which is the felling of a Scots pine tree against the preservation order at St Elfyn's Park. Is it possible for me to just ask for that to be taken quite seriously? Because it sounds like quite a bad thing to do.
Yes, Councillor Buttle, we have taken that seriously. That case needs closing down because we discovered that the Scots pine was diseased and an appropriate replacement tree has been agreed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Gamble.
On the closed case on Stanton, you came upon the thing. I've got to unauthorised change of building to retail sale of plants for fertiliser. I'm just asking why it says complaint unfounded, because obviously that company is called North Park Pets. Company's house registration 1329017, registered on the 24th of March 2021, with a Facebook page and a website. On what basis is it unfounded?
Sorry, which page are you on, Councillor?
3. Under Stanton.
Better place to answer that question, Councillor Gamble. We have served a planning contravention notice, so we have taken action in respect of that case, and what we do as part of that is we ask a series of structured questions, and the recipient of that planning contravention notice has to answer those questions correctly, otherwise they would be committing an offence, and they have to return the information to us within a prescribed period of 21 days, otherwise again they'll be committing an offence. And based on the information they sent to us, and we, even yourself, visited the site yesterday and were able to observe from within that building how it's being used, and the grooming parlour and any commercial operations from the site are not evident, and they've confirmed as such in that correspondence to us.
So am I right in saying they denied there is an application which they themselves registered with Company's House at that address?
Well, they may have registered a company, but that company may not be active. In planning terms, we're concerned with use of land and buildings, not...
I'm sorry, Councillor Gamble, it's not a planning consideration, and these are only for noting. So with that, I'll move second, Councillor Purdy. All those in favour, please show. That's been carried. Thank you very much, members. Pardon?
Do we not get an against?
Against?
Thank you.
Okay.
Going against something that's just a notice.
Yeah.
Because I disagree with
Excuse me, can you be quiet, please? I won't ask you again. Right, the last bit of business we need to do now is appeals process report, and there is nothing to report. We haven't had any appeals come back. John, is there anything you want to add?
Nothing to add, Chair.
So that's for noting again. Somebody to move it?
I'll move, Chair.
Second, Councillor Bull. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Close the meeting, and thank you very much, members.